Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest live episode of Vox Vomitus. I'm your host, Jennifer Ann Gordon, the author of Pretty Ugly, the Hotel series, and the Japanese Box, and other stories. Joining me today, as always, is my Vox Vomitus vixen, my co-hostess with the mostest, Allison Hubbard Martine Hubbard.
Sure.
All of the last names.
Yes.
All of the last names. Allison is the author of the Bourbon books, which includes Dibs Since September, Move on Melinda, Climb the Salmon Ladder, and Ranchers Take Manhattan. All in one breath. I take my inhaler now before the show, so I can do that.
You can do my titles.
So I can do the titles. We are joined by one of our favorite people in the entire world, who is now in the Three Timers Club.
Yeah.
For Vox Vomitus, which is kind of like the Five Timers Club on SNL, except more illustrious. Vince Liaguno, Vince A. Liaguno, author of Demo Reels and Arthouse Madness, and very, very recent Bram Stoker nominee. We're going to talk.
Also the Three-Time Club.
Yeah, because it's your third Bram Stoker nomination.
Third nomination.
Wow. So we're getting like a little bit of a math lesson today.
Don't get excited. It took 20 years to get 3 nominations, but
it's
still
awesome.
Impressive. That's
very, very
so
impressive.
awesome.
So Vince, welcome back to Vox Vomitus.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I love you.
Yes, we love you. Tell our viewers and our listeners a little bit about you, and then a little bit about your new book, which came out yesterday.
Yesterday was the release date.
Happy book birthday.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so this was actually, people who know anything about me know that I'm primarily an anthologist who kind of dabbles, and I do writing. I did have a novel once upon a time, but I've been primarily an anthologist with the Unspeakable Horror series, Other Terrors. We have a new one coming out called Don't Ask, Ghosts Tell, which is an LGBTQ military themed, kind of very current with what's going on now in our lovely, exciting, peaceful world. And I
things are going really well.
Yeah. Co-edited that with Sarah Medeiros from Tundra Swan Press. So that comes out this summer. But this little goodie here was a labor of love. So the condensed version is that my then fiance, now husband,
Yay!
We had moved out to Michigan in 2015. And we lived in a town a little over Ann Arbor called Brighton. And we lived here for about a year. Really wasn't a great move for us. We did some things for relocating that probably weren't beneficial. We rented instead of buying a house. We weren't close to family. We didn't really have a circle of friends. And, in your 40s and 50s, it's not like you go to the library and be like, I'm going to bring cupcakes and make some friends today. You just how do you make friends when you're like old?
Okay, we seriously, I had a drive up to LA this weekend, and I was talking to one of my friends that has known me since I was 18. So we predated that, but talking about that and how do you do that? So we'll get back to that. But why can't we just bring cupcakes to libraries?
Right, that would be so much fun.
You guys are killing me. First you said lasagna earlier, and now we're talking about cupcakes.
The cupcakes, who has nuts, who has allergies, and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so we wound up that it became a really lonely year for me, that 2015 to 2016. And I don't remember, I think it might have been the poet Mary Oliver. Somehow I got into someone's poetry and just did a deep dive and kind of used that year of this loneliness to just kind of delve into poetry. I started taking online classes, started auditing at the local college in Michigan, just like really immersed myself in the form. And I found I kind of liked it. So after we moved back to New York, I spent the next year or so crafting probably 60, 70 poems. And I worked with Stephanie, and I always massacre her last name, Wittowich.
Like we do to yours?
Yeah. Is her last name Liaguno?
Very good. If it was, I would have pronounced it right.
So tell us Stephanie's name again, because I heard sandwich, but I think I'm just hungry.
Wittowich.
Wittowich. So
Widow Witch. Okay.
Widow Witch.
You probably know her. She's an incredible poet, horror poet. She's won some Bram Stoker. She's just incredible. So I hooked up with her as like a mentor through Crystal Lake Publishing, and she and I spent about a year, literally a line by line, exhaustive critique of these poems as she worked with me.
Wow.
And we just made it stronger and better. I learned so much from her. And at the end of it, she says, this is really good. She says, I'm one of the editors at Raw Dog Screaming Press. When you're ready, I would love for you to submit this to me. Said,
and you were like, send.
No, because we've got some time between then and now. So
that was the interesting thing. So I continued to work on this collection. I just kept tweaking it, refining it. I would take a poem out. I would add a poem. I was trying to get the rhythm of the whole thing because, poetry is about a rhythm and developing kind of like a cohesive. I wanted a kind of a cohesive theme around it. And it wasn't immediately coming to me. So yeah, it took me another, I would say, 3 years of just tinkering with this thing. And then I finally felt it was ready. And I submitted it to her in the end of 2013. And they bought it, made the announcement. And 1 year later, here we are. And I'm excited.
I'm just gonna do a little math and say it's 2023 probably instead of 2013. Yeah.
Oh, did I say 2013?
Yeah.
We all wish it was 2013.
This is why I write and I don't do math.
Yeah. I know, me neither. And I was just like, wait a second, did we go in time travel? Because for me, everything's kind of before and after, and I keep track of by how old my children are. And 2013 was the year of Bronwyn, which was longer ago. She's 11. So I'm like, no, that didn't work. Okay. 2023.
So it was, there was still another 3 or 4 years in between where I just continued to work on it. There was something about this that I wanted it to be perfect in my eyes, because this was a real labor of love. It was something that I had never expected to do, never expected to fall in love with poetry. And so, of course, now there's something else to distract me from, finishing that second novel.
Yeah.
Anthology is now poetry. Great.
I'm going to hop on board that. Like, I'm not a poet, but I've spent the last year putting off finishing my novel because I have this folder on my laptop that just says The Collection. And I've just been like working on short creative nonfiction pieces, a little bit of poetry, and everything's going into this folder that just says The Collection.
And then when you don't feel like writing, you go into The Collection and you rearrange the order of things. Like, oh, that was really good.
I do. I literally just move things around.
I'm with you.
And I have this really long essay that each paragraph starts with like the letter of an alphabet, and it's like, it's like a dictionary. And I'm like, well, I can't publish it until I'm done this like 9,000 word essay anyways. And I'm up to like U. And I'm like, I'm getting close to the end of the alphabet.
You're like the Sue Grafton of the collection.
Yeah, that's true.
D is for deliriously happy.
Yeah, I feel like Jennifer's alphabet would be very different than Sue Grafton's, but that's
my S was Stephen King.
I don't think Sue Grafton's was Stephen King.
No.
Too bad. Too bad. But Vince, you brought up we talked about creative nonfiction. So this recent Stoker nomination was for, I'm assuming that's the categories creative nonfiction. The categories for Stoker are like this long, and I don't know like the short punchy way of saying.
I think this one's short nonfiction.
Nonfiction.
It's everything in their awards body begins with superior achievement
in.
And then so this one's superior achievement in short nonfiction, and that was from this little tome, which is a fabulous book your viewers might enjoy, from Cemetery Dance Publications. And this one's called You're Not Alone in the Dark. And it talks to a series of creatives who struggle or have struggled with some type of either disability, mental illness, some type of past trauma. Eugene Johnson started the anthology. Eric Wienard helped finish it, and then Cemetery Dance did an incredible job putting it out. And mine is actually the first one in there, and it's called The Horror of Donna Berzato and Her Feast of the Seven Fishes. I don't know if the audience will immediately get the reference, but anybody who watches The Bear on Hulu will know that in the second season, when all of the episodes dropped, people were very excited to find out that Jamie Lee Curtis, who, I may have a passing...
You have like a little bit of you're like a minor fan of hers.
Passing fancy with that Jamie Lee Curtis was in 2 of the episodes. So, of course, she's in episode like 6 and 10 or 6 and 8. So, of course, you've got to binge them all because I've got to get to Jamie Lee's episode.
And it was such an episode, too. It's like...
Well, it was interesting because Gene had been after me and kept saying, will you write something? Will you write something? And I'm like, well, I'm blessed. I don't, have at least a known disability besides my craziness, an obsession with Jamie Lee Curtis.
I was going to say, obsession with Jamie Lee Curtis isn't really, technically, it's not a disability.
Yeah, I don't really know what the diagnostic criteria is for Jamie Lee Curtis obsession, but you meet it. So there you go.
So we were watching episode 6, which is called Fishes, and I'm watching, and you've both seen it, I'm assuming?
I have. And it was like watching a family. It was like watching My Mother. It was very hard to get through. And your essay, Vince.
Well, it was kind of shocking to me because I didn't know other than that she was going to play the dysfunctional patriarch of this family. And as you're watching it, I'm kind of absorbed by her performance, and I realize that like my stomach is clenching, I'm sweating, I'm very nervous, and I realized with this like gobsmacking kind of clarity that I was watching my mom on camera, and my mom and I hadn't spoken since I was 16 when she left our family. She died in 2015. I was not I found out 2 years after she had passed away. So there was a very long estrangement. So I was kind of like amazed watching this, and it kind of hit me that, wow, what I dealt with all those years that I thought was abuse, my mom was clearly undiagnosed with some type of mental illness. That was a pretty profound kind of clarity and kind of a gift. But then we get to the last episode of the season, and I forgot if it was 8 or 10, but there's a scene where now the main cast of characters is opening up they've gone from running a sandwich shop to opening this fine dining restaurant, and they're all there, they're all bustling around, and the son-in-law spots Jamie Lee Curtis's character outside the window of this restaurant. Sorry, every time I talk about this, I get really emotional. And he runs out to her and he says, Donna, are you going to come in? And I remember she looks at him and she says something to the effect of, no, I'm not going to come in because I want them to have this one really, really nice thing. And in that moment, I started to sob because that gift of the writing, that gift of the acting on that show gave me an alternative story. It gave me an alternative story that, my mom walked out. My mom was abusive. She did horrible, horrible things. But maybe in all those years, there was a point, my college graduation, my first book signing, something, maybe she was standing outside too. Maybe she really was there. And maybe she just didn't want to ruin that one thing for me.
Yeah.
So to say that this was the most personal thing I've ever written is an understatement. And to have the HWA members, who recommend these things and elevated up the nomination process was just really rewarding. And I'm so grateful because if there was anything I've ever written that I would have liked to have seen get some recognition, this was it. Because this was but it was funny because I could
We're
do a
so proud of you,
Aww.
as not just as, a creative and an author. Like, obviously, we're proud of you for that. But like, as a friend of Vox Vomitus, as a friend of ours, like it was such a brave and beautiful essay. Allison and I both read it this week.
Thank you.
And
it's amazing. And I could probably do a follow-up someday about, I laugh when people say, oh, I'm what are you doing this weekend? You say, well, I'm binging this, or I'm watching that, or I'm going this week. Oh, why do you waste your time with television? Why do you waste
Not a
your
waste
time?
of time.
It's not a waste.
There are such things that come out through that art form. And this is a prime example that can literally transform your life. Because I went from a place, and it was I was in a good spot. I had, years of therapy. I knew how those bags are packed tight.
Yep.
They're in the back of my mind. They're in my attic. You're never going to get rid of the baggage, but it's there.
It's there, neatly packed away.
But it was tidy. But
Yep.
what this did was it gave me a whole nother lens to look through. And instead of carrying it as a controlled resentment, it filled me with a tremendous empathy. And although I'll never forget what she did, I can forgive it because of that mental illness. That was a gift. That was a gift. That was Chris Storer who wrote the episode. That was Jamie Lee Curtis's performance. That was the other and interactions with the ensemble. I mean, that was the whole show that really changed my life in that manner. So when people say that, TV and movies and all, they're just a time waster, I say, fuck you. No, they're not.
Agreed. Well, and I think it also depends on what you're watching and what kind of lens, like you said, what kind of lens you're watching through. Because if you're sitting back as someone who's passive, who doesn't really want to get anything from it, and you're just watching garbage, sure, it can be garbage, but it's also stuff that can really open, like you said, open your eyes to stuff in your own life and bring a new lens to your own things. And I just want to say, you had asked if we both seen it. I hadn't, and it's one of those shows. I've heard about it. I didn't even know it was about a restaurant. If I would have known that, I would have been watching earlier because food.
Yeah,
but
I'm surprised you don't watch it, Allison, with how much
great.
Nobody told me that it had
so
food till literally Vince's essay.
It is
an
outstanding show.
And I was just going to say, I just applaud your writing, because for someone who hadn't watched the show, I still completely could get everything from that essay, even not having seen the episodes, because of how well you describe it. And I could feel it, because there was so much trauma packed into the earlier part about what you endured. And I won't get into that because it's there in the essay. People should go read the essay. But reading that, I just broke for you, and that you were able to put that in there and then find a way to see beyond yourself into someone else who may have gone through it, and then even do the flipped perspective of seeing it from the abuser's point of view. Doesn't excuse it, doesn't make it okay. But
it's a disease.
It is.
And
at the time, she did the best.
She did the best.
What it was the 1980s. Mental health wasn't discussed openly. I can remember telling, I went to parochial school, and I can remember telling, I think one of the nuns casually mentioning, they're like, oh, you look tired. And I was like, oh, well, my mom and dad, were fighting last night. And then the nun, well-meaning as she was, calls the house of and I remember like getting beat, how dare you?
How dare you talk about our family business?
The dirty laundry. No one can talk about it. And
so how could she have gotten help? There was no help to be gotten. So, you try to just look at it. The show gave me just this gift of grace, just to look at it in a totally different way.
Yeah. I mean, it really did.
And then it was Jamie Lee was what really kind of prompted the essay, because she was there earlier in my adolescence as a beacon as well.
The full circle of Jamie Lee.
Full circle of Jamie Lee Curtis.
It sounds crazy, but it's just.
I'm honestly shocked you haven't done a Jamie Lee Curtis themed anthology. Should you do a Jamie Lee Curtis themed
I'm just saying. Does she have a milestone birthday coming up? You can do it in honor of, maybe? I don't know.
Do I want to be on? Do I really want a restraining order?
I mean,
but if you're just editing the anthology and it's other people's work, I mean, that happens. It's, I don't think Stephen King did a restraining order for his.
My dream would be to, because she's always said, because people have asked her, because, she's a writer, she writes kids' books.
Yep.
And they've said, are you going to write like your memoirs? And she says, absolutely not. She said, because in order for me to do it, and in order for me to be truthful about it, I'd have to break confidences, and I'd have to reveal things that I promised people I wouldn't reveal, which is very admirable. But I said, it was funny when we got married. So we'll kind of segue into this weird little story. So with everything that happened politically, we saw on Facebook, I'm friends with a woman, her name is Sarah Cunningham, and she is the founder of this organization called Free Mom Hugs. And her story is one also of transformation. She was a very religious, I think, Baptist mom whose son came out to her. She handled it horribly. She caused a lot of pain, a lot of hurt. But through engaging with her son and with the community, she has since turned her whole life around now, that she actually not only officiates same-sex weddings, but she will stand in for people whose own parents have disowned them. So if they need a parent to go to a wedding,
sorry, I'm just going to start crying.
She is truly, she and the volunteers at Free Moms Hugs are proof that angels walk on this earth. So she had put out, and I think it was maybe late November, early December, that, hey, with everything going on politically, LGBT people may now want to be in a rush to get married and cement their unions in law before possibly it gets taken away. Hey, if I'm available on your date, I will do your wedding, or find someone who could do your wedding for free. So I said to Brian, okay, it's 13 years, you want to get married?
Time to put a ring on it.
Seriously.
Sure. So we contacted her.
That's a very romantic proposal, Vince.
Well, no, we were engaged for many, many years. I did the on the knee.
I know. I was going to say, I was shocked that I would assume. Yeah.
So we contacted her, and I was thinking, she says, well, when? And then it just dawned on me, because it was coming up. I'm like, Jamie Lee Curtis and Christopher Guest are celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary on December 18th. Are you free?
Are you free December 18th? Are they free?
She's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. It wasn't until we started talking. And of course, Brian and I were not going to let her absorb any cost. We flew her out really nice. We had her stay in a nice hotel. She came to our house. We really scrambled to put this micro wedding together, which wound up being at this beautiful bed and breakfast.
I love micro wedding. That's so cute.
We called it. The place is called the Stone Chalet in Ann Arbor, and it was basically the ceremony, the photographer, and then cake. And it was like about 20 people. So we had mostly Brian's family. Our friends couldn't come out on such short notice from New York. So as we're getting to know her, she obviously comes to realize I'm this huge, Jamie Lee Curtis fan. And we're talking because Jamie Lee Curtis had optioned the rights to her book about her story about how she came to do this.
Oh my gosh.
It was supposed to be a Lifetime movie, but wound up not happening. It kind of landed up in development hell. It's gone on too long. Jamie's moved on. Sarah's moved on. Her organization has gone international now with Free Mom Hugs. So, but it was kind of fun to talk. It's like, she's telling me I was in Jamie's house and I was in the kitchen, and it was for a fan. I was just geeking out.
Yeah, were you like, what does her house smell like?
Well, that does sound like the starting evidence for your restraining order. I was in her house. I was in her kitchen.
So flash forward to the ceremony. Yeah. And in the middle of this ceremony, she has, her little book, and she's got her notes for Brian and I, and she's doing a thing, and she says, and I wish I could remember the words. I have to look at the tape. She says, Vince is a huge fan of Jamie Lee Curtis, and she whips out an envelope. Jamie Lee Curtis wanted to send her regards, and I'm like thinking this is some kind of weird joke. It's like,
yeah.
I'm all emotional in the moment, so I'm like, I'm not getting this right. So she hands me this envelope, and it's Jamie Lee Curtis's handwriting to Sarah's address. I pull it out. I'm going to show it to you. Viewers have never seen this. So it's on her letterhead, and it's dated for our wedding date. And she writes, Vince and Brian, the long and winding road, hold hands, tell the truth, deep breath, and jump. XO Jamie Lee Curtis. When I tell you there was not a dry eye in this wedding hall, everybody knows, even the people who own the place now realize how much this means. I'm crying, Brian's crying, Sarah's crying. I was just like, I couldn't.
That is so beautiful.
That is basically the equivalent of a papal blessing there, right there.
But she blessed your union.
And exactly.
The Pope was there.
Exactly.
Better than the Pope, honestly.
Better than the Pope. Hotter than
I would rather
Pope.
have. Well, I would rather have Jamie Lee Curtis too, but That's just me.
But yeah, so that it was a full just a weird full circle moment. So it's been a weird couple months with just a lot of JLC connections and things. So to go back to, as I'm talking to Sarah, and I'm of course regurgitating all of my completely useless knowledge about Jamie Lee Curtis.
It's not useless.
Sarah looks at me and she says, you should really write her biography.
Yeah.
I said, Sarah, she doesn't want, she doesn't want a memoir. She says, but a memoir and a biography are different things. She says, you could focus on just a career-oriented biography. Leave all the personal crap out. You got to obviously say she adopted a daughter here, whatever. But you don't have to go into the personal. So who knows?
New project to keep you from writing that second novel.
I know. You don't need to write that second novel, Vince. You can write Jamie Lee's biography.
I do also want to figure out, and I'm not good with the editing stuff with video, but I will point out if someone goes back and watches this as this part where we're talking about before you got married, when that started, you had said Jamie Lee Curtis when we got married, and it made it sound like when you married Jamie Lee Curtis. Like,
that was a Freudian slip there.
Could have sworn your husband's name was Brian and not Jamie Lee Curtis, but
Brian, Jamie Lee Curtis, on one
of them have very special places in your heart, and
you love them both.
We love that
different ways.
So it's been a fun time, but so we're looking forward to the Stokers. We'll see what'll happen. We'll see.
Will you be coming out to Connecticut?
So right now I'm 50-50 on it. I have booked the hotel suite. I did buy tickets for Brian and I. It's just a matter of the logistics, and we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, I'm still up in the air. I feel like I should go because it's like in New England.
Yes,
kind of close to you.
I mean, close is all relative, but it's like a 5-hour drive still.
For a Californian, I'm like, all your states are together and they're all just kind of, New England is just one state with good chowder. So I don't really know how far apart these things are because I'm like, I drove an hour on Saturday to get somewhere.
It's like 4 hours, but Connecticut is like very traffic heavy. So that's like another.
Connecticut's just a weird state to navigate through. It's not a very traffic friendly state.
No. And I was like, well, maybe I can take the train. And then I'm like, no, that would be longer. Maybe I can take a bus. Yeah. And I was just like, and it's literally like I would have to take a bus to New York City and then take another bus to.
Yeah. We'll see if you went, that would be added incentive for me to.
I know. I think
I to like egg each other on. If you go, I go.
I've never been to the Stokers.
You haven't? I thought you'd gone before.
No.
Okay.
I watched them online.
I went
and stay up late, and I'm like, those are my people.
Exactly.
I went 3 times. This would be my 4th. I went in 2009 in Burbank. Then I ran the convention in 2011.
So you had to be there.
I had to be there. And then I went to, I think it was 2013 in New Orleans, which was the first and last time I would ever go to New Orleans.
No offense to New Orleans, but.
No offense to anybody watching that's from New Orleans. You have a lovely city. I'm sorry that it smells like pee and vomit, but
that's also true.
We all have
It does smell like that.
I'm not saying there's a benefit to the long COVID issues, but if you still have lost your sense of smell, that might be a good time
to go to Bourbon Street.
I honestly think if I ever went back to New Orleans, I should have done more of the spooky stuff, the cemetery tours, go by Anne Rice's house, that kind of stuff. We didn't do that. We did the get the drink that's this big, walk through the street going, I have alcohol. That's the novelty.
I was in New Orleans once in my life, and we were staying with a Scientologist burlesque dancer. So that was a hoot. But she gave us like a tip, make sure you leave Bourbon Street when you start to smell vomit, just go to a different block. And I just remember like we were walking and we saw them like just hosing down the sidewalks, and I'm like, oh, they're hosing the vomit off at like noon.
Oh, yeah.
But I will say we went, and it was November. We were performing in the Fringe Festival, and it was cold, so it wasn't like that hot pee and puke smell.
Yeah.
So, but it was still there.
This was in I think it was in May. It wasn't horrible, but it was in the hotel Corleone. Does that sound familiar? That was
Thank
it was
you.
it was in a very nice hotel. It had I remember specifically it had a bar that revolved. It was like on a terrace.
Ooh.
So you
So
get
like
extra spinny.
I know, like
Well,
Well,
It's
the
your
problem with
idea.
that is if you were like this on off the part that was revolving and you turned for a minute and you went back. So Jennifer, oh hi, you're not Jennifer.
Yeah.
Because Jennifer's now like 30 feet behind.
Bye.
Oh, okay. Nice seeing you. Bye. Like, who am I talking to? But it
No
was
clue anymore because I've had 3 of these.
I would love if you go to the Stokers, I'll go to the Stokers. Like, I'll
but if
go.
you go to the Stokers, I'll go to
I want you guys both to go to the Stokers because
Yeah.
I hate when awards are announced and you see individuals announcing and you can't find just the freaking master list, because I swear the morning of the Stokers, my Facebook feed was just full of people we love, like Vince, like Clay McLeod Chapman, like Paul Chambly, like Josh Mullen. Everybody's nominated. Like, it was such an amazing. So Jennifer, you gotta go because I can't go. So please go and be like,
I know.
we know you.
This year again, great nominees. I mean, the novel category.
The novel category.
Josh Mallerman, Paul Tremblay, Stephen Graham Jones,
Gwendolyn Kais.
Mhm.
Yes,
Seriously,
Gwendolyn.
like the whole thing. I'm like, I've either read these books or something by these people, and I'm just going, and this is all Jennifer's fault.
And I do want to give, if you'll indulge me a moment, I do want to, because I have publicly railed about this in the past. I think I mentioned when Unspeakable Horror from the Shadows of the Closet won the Stoker, that was the first and only time that an expressly queer horror anthology had been nominated and had won. And that was 11 years from the time that the award was originated to I Won It. As of last year, we've gone another 16 without a single LGBTQ nominee in the anthology category until this year. And I am so proud of the HWA members because we have not one, but 2 fabulous gay anthologies that are nominated. We have the Rob Costello anthology, We Mostly Come Out at Night.
Okay, I love that cover.
It's fabulous. And it's
so cute.
It's, I think it's middle grade
It
anthology, and it's fabulous. It has a story by one of my dear friends, Michael Thomas Ford, that's fantastic. So this is nominated. And then I'm going to probably massacre her name.
Okay.
Sophia Ajram.
That's how I say it.
Ajram? Okay.
Yeah.
I looked everywhere to see if I could find a pronunciation key on social media. She doesn't have one. But her anthology, which is also very different in tone, Bury Your Gaze, an anthology of tragic queer horror, is also nominated.
And she's nominated for
long
for
fiction.
her novella. Yep.
For Coup de Grace.
Coup de Grace.
I believe. Yep. So congratulations to both of them, and yay queer horror. I'm so excited for that category. So I have to publicly say, hey, HWA,
good job.
Not 1, but 2 nominees. But yeah, I was really excited.
And The Haunting of Velkwood in a novel category, that is a queer horror story.
Which one?
Haunting of Velkwood, the Gwendolyn Kais book.
Okay. And Eric LaRocca is also
and Eric
nominated.
LaRocca. Yep.
It's
a good year.
There's some LGBT nominations, I think, in poetry too.
Yeah.
So there's quite a bit. So I was happy to see that, especially again, in the times that we're living, to elevate those voices and make sure those voices aren't silenced is going to be crucial. And as creatives, we kind of have a responsibility. And as organizations, I hope that we feel a responsibility to elevate those voices. So
absolutely,
HWA for getting them on the front.
Well, and I also, you make that point about elevating those voices. And one of the things I've seen repeatedly on social media, which I take to heart, is it shouldn't always be on the people who are in those groups to be elevating those voices, because it's a lot of emotional labor to always be like, because it's February. And of course, our government's like, we don't have Black History Month anymore. We're like, actually, yes, we still do. And so a lot of people are making that effort, but then they're going to Black creatives and going, give me
you do the work.
Right.
Yeah.
And And so every time I see those posts, I try to hop on there and recommend the ones that I've read within the last couple of years. So I'm like, these are the ones you need to be reading. Please enjoy these. Here's a link to the work. Here's a link to these people's websites. Find the books, grab them from wherever you can, buy them, listen to them on Audible. And the same thing goes when I recently saw someone was like, oh, I'm looking for more LGBTQ plus reads and trying to find those. And it does help because now I'm going to take a moment of indulgence that one of my besties' books is coming out this year. And we finally have the title correct. So I can say The Dramatic Life of Jonah Penrose by Robin Greene will be coming out later this year. That falls into, I'm not sure if it would be considered wrong. What?
Great title.
It's a great title, which is great that we decided on the title. And I say we as if I had any influence because I did. Because I went through what are we calling this? And the title actually had to change because her character's name had to change because it may have been a little bit too close to a real person. So we're like, hold on, that person exists. Let's kind of adjust these things here. But being able to shout out for those books that do that, because I find that one of the things, and I have a friend who they work in some kind of algorithmic programming thing for one of the library services. I'm not going to pretend I understand it, but being able to do filters for searches by things like, she's like, we finally got first in series to be able to be a filter. Like, well, yeah, that would be really helpful if you're looking for a book that you want the first one and not, oh, look, it's book 6. That's not helpful. To be able to filter by, can you show me books that fall into this category, not just by larger genre, but if you're like, I am really trying to read more of authors from this background, show me them. To be able to filter that way and find them more easily, it would really help if the platforms do that. And until then, we need to just do it as a community.
That's great. That's great. And when does her book come out?
Her book, so The Dramatic Life of Jonah Penrose comes out, I want to say in the fall.
She likes saying that.
I do like saying that.
It's a great name.
And Penrose kind of flows right off your lips. Penrose.
And I just saw it this morning, the final cover, and I'm very excited to get to share, but I'm not allowed to yet. Well, just message her.
I know. I'm like, I'm going to message her.
She'll send it to you. But you know, I've seen some of the earlier versions where things weren't quite right, or that sends a thing, or this one looks more like it's possibly like it's set in the West End, and the first version looked maybe like it was set in High School Musical. We're like, probably not the right vibe. We need to make sure people know these are grown-ups and not, you know, they're going to start, we're all in this together with pom-poms. Not happening in this book because it's West End themed. So that's coming out, I want to say in the fall, I want to say November, but it's also being released in Germany, and I want to say they may have a different release date. So
wow, exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. But I want to make sure that people know about these books and have ways to find these books. And it's even harder when you have things like collections to be like, okay, so this piece is in this collection because Vince, you were so kind to send us a PDF of just your work, but I'm like, okay, I don't think I knew it was in that without looking at, oh, okay, it's on the Stoker nominee list of the final ballot for.
And there are so many because although the anthology didn't get nominated, I really want to recommend it because there are such great.
I've heard wonderful things about the anthology, and I have been meaning to buy it for like ages.
I mean, there are some great people in here. Joe Lansdale, Lucy Taylor, Jamal Hodge, Tim Wagner's in it, Mark Matthews, David Sims, Gary Braunbeck.
Very nice.
Lisa Morton. There's a lot of people in here, so I highly recommend. And the introduction is penned by Billy Martin, who is formerly Poppy Z. Bright.
Yep.
So,
I was going to say, I'm like, I don't know that name. I know Poppy Z. Bright.
Yeah. So, and Billy Martin is writing as Poppy Z. Bright, the introduction here.
Okay, so is Billy writing? Because my sister introduced me to Poppy Z. Bright, and I loved Poppy Z. Bright. And then when my sister said, since Poppy Z. Bright has gone through the transition, he hasn't written. And my sister was like, really like, come on, we loved your voice. So he's writing. So that's good. So I don't know how long he's been writing as Billy. So I didn't know that.
Think he hasn't really written very much as Billy. I want to say he has a story coming out in the Stand anthology. I could be wrong.
I think
I'm right.
This one too, it's a little bit trickier to tell because it says it's credited as by Billy Martin, and then in parentheses, writing as Poppy Z. Bright.
Got it.
So it's by Billy, but still writing as Poppy Z. Bright. So I
would totally understand.
Back into.
And using a former name as a pen name also makes sense to make sure readers know how to find you. So whatever name they're writing under, I want to read it because that was some of the first like I read the Vampire Works by Poppy Z. Bright, and then the Prime that restaurant anthology. I'm like, oh, food fiction is a thing I absolutely adore, and I love that. It was set in New Orleans, but I didn't have to smell it.
It wasn't a scratch and sniff.
Revert right back to the bear. She's got to watch the bear.
Of course,
you do have to watch the bear.
I would have known it was about food. I would have been watching it, but
it's so good.
But I do love just anthologies also in general, and I want to talk about some of the poetry in your collection. But okay. I do just want to say, when you were listing the people who are in that anthology, I feel like anthologies are the unsung hero of being able to introduce readers to new writers, because you can get just, here's a big chunk of books, maybe you know one name on it. I just bought one on Saturday from an author in person who I didn't know, and the only name I knew on them, like, S.A. Cosby. It's Sean Cosby. I didn't know he wrote I think it's like space funk. It's some kind of Black-centered space funk anthology, and it's like this big. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to buy that. And there's probably 50 authors in there that I haven't read before, and I'm so excited to read it. It is a physical book, so I don't know when that's going to happen, but cheer me on anyway.
And it's interesting because where we are societally now too, people, their attention spans are this big. So you would think that short fiction would be like the predominant thing going on in culture right now. But I don't think publishers, anthologists, writers, I don't think anyone yet has figured out that perfect little marketing campaign to make that connect with readers. Like, hey, don't worry about this big giant novel. You could read 3 pages and it's a complete story, and then tomorrow you could read 7, and then I don't think people, because I think the anthologies should be so much more dominant in our culture than they are.
I agree.
And you're like the king of editing anthologies. Is that like, are you more passionate about that, you think, like elevating voices and curating these collections? Do you like that more than writing?
I was going to wait for you to finish that sentence and say, then Jamie Lee Curtis? And I'm like, well, no, not more than Jamie Lee Curtis, but I know what your question is now.
Maybe Brian. But, you know, I probably do. And as much as I, you know, because sometimes what happens is I'll see like these great anthologies, and I'll, you know, commend somebody, and I'll say to the editor, like, hey, you know, I'm a writer too, so keep me in mind next time, you know, you're put out a call. I would love to write for you. People don't, you know, people equate me, I think, more with the anthologies, and probably at the end of the day, I probably do gravitate more to the anthologies. I do. I love discovering new voices. I love elevating new voices. I love putting established voices in an arena where you normally wouldn't find them, like S.A. Cosby. I put him in Other Terrors, and I was one of the first horror anthologies that he appeared in.
I loved his story in Other Terrors.
And then everybody that read that, I think, was like, oh, wait a minute, S.A. Cosby, he'd be great. I love doing that. I love putting people where you don't expect to find them. When I did, speaking of like Stoker cons and Stoker weekends, when I did the one in 2011, one of my guests, because our theme was shades and variations on genre, and one of the guests that I picked for this, which everybody looked at me sideways at first, and then it wound up being the biggest hit of the convention, was Gillian Flynn. Nobody was looking at Gillian Flynn as a horror author. Nobody was looking. And when she came and started to...
And then they haven't read Sharp Objects, because that is very clearly horror.
But it was, you know, again, it wasn't marketed that way.
Yeah.
So, and that's the kind of stuff. So yeah, to answer your question, I think probably, although I love my own writing, I probably still will always gravitate to anthologies, because I love the curation. I love putting them together, finding that theme, finding that rhythm. And like, I love discovering new people, new voices. I love elevating folks like that.
I love that. And before I forget, what I love so much about this collection, besides everything, but I really appreciated at the end of your book, your afterword, the list of all the movies. Like,
that was Stephanie's idea. I cannot take credit for that.
I was just like, I love it.
There were so many movie references that, Stephanie suggested at the very, very end of the editing process. She said, what would be really cool is maybe as in like an afterword, have a list of each poem and put down the film references that you use in the poem, because that also kind of cements the idea that this was kind of like I think in the trailer we used the phrase lyrical madness in 35 millimeter. You know,
I love it.
That was kind of like the theme of it, and it was just taking all these how all these movies were part of just my consciousness growing up.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ever saw,
it's such a love letter to.
There's a poem in there about the fictional band who spends 5 minutes, if that, in the movie Motel Hell. Ivan and the Terribles. You know, they get a story. You know, they had a happy ever after, at least through their reputation.
They have more in yours than they did in the movie.
They did. Some of them did.
Now, are there poems and pieces that like ended up on the cutting room floor that didn't? Is it enough for?
It's a terrible reference, Jennifer, but I love it.
I know.
Cutting
I
room
was like,
floor.
wait for it.
There were a couple that, you know, and that's what I liked about working with Stephanie is Stephanie was an honest editor, and if something was crap, or if something just wasn't working, she would say it much more diplomatically, but she'd be like, yeah, no, you know, this just isn't. And then there were a couple where, you know, we were on the fence, but I was able to, in the context of other poems, the way that they were going to be lined up, I was able to talk her into, like, there's the one about the haiku poem with all of the Friday the 13th franchise. And she's like, you know, this is so repetitive. And I says, yes. I said, but that's the title of the poem, Franchise Fatigue. Halfway through this, you're like, okay, Friday the 13th, I get it. That's how you felt as a viewer when you were going through those films, when they were in the cinema, right?
The essence was there.
Yeah, so then that one stayed. But there were a couple that ended up on the cutting room floor for sure.
Well, and I was going to say, well, but I mean, I think whenever also you're doing a collection, you have to then pull out pieces that don't fit, not because they aren't beautiful or wonderful. They just don't go here. So sometimes it's not so much cutting room floor as bonus features for another thing. Like,
well, there was
the director's cut.
This one was specifically very horror, queer horror, slasher horror. But then there were some poems that were very much just more LGBTQ from like a middle-aged man's kind of background. So they actually have all gone into a folder for a second collection. That'll be a non-horror collection. Yeah.
Got it.
One of the poems was called Batgirl in Barbie Clothes. And it was about how a gay little boy who periodically wanted to play with a doll, how he did it on the down low by getting his parents to buy action figures, stealing friends' Barbie clothes, and then Batgirl could hop into a new outfit.
Which is kind of like the opposite of what me and my friends would do, because if we had Barbie clothes. Okay, to be fair, I did also have G.I. Joes, and if you twist the G.I. Joes enough, they spin around really fast and eventually do snap. So probably be careful of that, because the little legs go really, really fast, and then they are not indestructible as you might think. But my Barbies were having all sorts of adventures, which is really hard when their feet are like this. But you know, being limited by any of that, of course, let Batgirl wear Barbie clothes. Let Superman wear Barbie clothes if his shoulders aren't too wide to get on.
My parents.
I wasn't that progressive as a young child just yet. But
my parents didn't want me to have a Ken doll because I think they thought I was going to make my dolls have sex. But lo and behold, I made my Barbies have sex with each other. They were the biggest lesbians in the entire world.
Well, I should not say. I was going to say the scissoring is pretty easy.
It was the scissoring.
Parts or not.
As I'm doing this, oh my gosh.
Oh Lord. Yeah, it's right around that time where our conversation usually devolves into complete and utter
witching hour.
It's so much nonsense at this point. But that's fine. But I do want to say, I think of the ones that I've read and that are going to stick with me the most, that I'm going to need to be on this is my essay of why I need therapy now, is Dumbwaiter. Because that one, like one of the things that I enjoy is you play with form in different ways. And even if things are haiku or repetitive, the Dumbwaiter one, just, it got to me, and I haven't gotten to the point where I saw what the movie reference is. So I'm wondering if it's something I've read, if that's part of it, or I'm just going to be traumatized by my own personal one.
I don't think that one had a movie reference.
Okay, then
one of the few that didn't.
Because for me, I mean, I was pulling from my own references of things I've seen, but just that format of the dumbwaiter goes up and and when it comes down, and that one is a complete story in of itself in like a page and a half. And it's chef's kiss of being able to pull that off in so many just perfection ways.
Thank you.
And making you hate a character in like 2 lines. I'm like, oh yeah, we hate him. Oh, doesn't end well for him. I'm okay with that.
And that's been kind of the fun thing about this too, because even more so than an anthology, because all of the poems, 51, 52 of them, all came from me. It's interesting to see now which ones people are relating to. Josh Mallerman basically said he needs therapy after Cinderella Boy. He cannot get Cinderella Boy out of his head, which I think is really interesting coming from Josh. You know, so I think it's kind of interesting which poems kind of resonate with different people, and that's kind of fun. This is the part where I get to enjoy.
Yeah, and go tell me what you think. Where did I traumatize you today?
Right, where they'll say like, you know, my God, that wasn't autobiographical, was it? Like, no, not that one. No,
not that one. That's what other horrifying ones were.
Yeah, that's my problem when I read Jennifer's stuff, because I usually know. I'm like, I know when this happened. Oh, you told me the story this was based on. It's like, Jennifer, why do you have so much to draw from? That's so traumatic.
Well, like, when your mother is an unmedicated, undiagnosed, severe bipolar disorder, all growing up. You get
ripe with material.
You get the material,
or make me feel bad for arachnids trapped in luggage, not the luggage that you've nicely packed and put in the back. Different luggage with hopefully no spiders in yours. Poor spider.
Allison's talking about a very specific line in an essay I have coming out.
Where we compared what we brought back from South American countries that we didn't mean to. Yeah.
Oh, you had a spider?
I had a tarantula in my backpack. Awful.
I had a tick on my leg.
Oh, that's worse, I think.
It wasn't bad. Okay,
my mother tried to keep the tarantula as a pet.
Yeah, no, I would probably.
She put it in a jar. It died. Thank God. And then she brought it to the vet, and they were like, "This is one of the most poisonous spiders in the world."
This is not the kind that you have.
Like when you unpacked, did it just like jump out at you, or did you?
First of all, I didn't unpack because I just had this feeling that there was something in the bag. So I was a jerk and just left my bag in the middle of the kitchen for like days and days until my mom was like, "You stupid bitch, I'm gonna unpack this." You know, and then she was like, "Oh, a spider."
Okay, see, here's the problem. My kids went to winter camp 2 weeks. Well, my girls did. They went to winter camp 2 weeks ago. One of my children unpacked right away, and I washed her clothes same day. The other one still has half unpacked laundry in my living room, like the cup. Now I think there's something in there. Of course, it was winter. There's probably nothing up.
But it's winter in California.
Mountains. It's probably fine. But I'm just like, no. What's in that bag, Bronwyn? What is in that bag? But it's not a tick. And the tick that I brought back from Brazil, not the same kind of ticks we get here. We call them miclins. And you have to make sure your pants tucked into your socks when you're walking through. But imagine like little dots. And we would sit there with masking tape and go.
I hate this.
And they didn't. But one of them, like my mom, when I got back, she's like, "All right, we're stripping you down. Go in there." And she had me do a 360 and looked, and I had a very tiny tick on the back of my thigh, and it was easily removed. And I don't think if I had any diseases, it would have killed me by now, because that was a really long time ago.
A long time ago. So you're fine. And you didn't get superpowers from it either. So that sucks.
I didn't. I'm really kind of sad about that. But I'm pretty sure it's just like a regular tick, not, I'm not Peter Parker.
No superpowers that you've discovered yet. Could be very, 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 very late.
Sabotage. Is that a superpower? Because I'm really good.
Is it panicking? Is panicking a superpower?
Yeah.
Is worrying?
It could be that.
I think we're all panicking right now.
So. We are.
Reasons to panic.
We love you. We will have you back on the show when the anthology comes out.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Sure. Or maybe I'll just fly to Detroit and we'll do a show together.
My God, in-house studio.
I was very lucky. I got to go to Vince's epic Christmas party this year.
You did.
I saw the pictures. I was so jealous. I'm just like,
I drank 1 billion drinks.
To get you to Detroit in the middle of next December.
My children to be 10 years older. Nothing's gonna happen by it. At least okay, it's my 2 older ones, fine. It's my little dude with ADHD that I had a hearing this morning that I had to make sure I was online at a certain time. So I'm like, I'm going to drop you off a little earlier. You are not going to go into the street. You are going to go up to the school. You are not going to walk down. Are you hearing me? What? I got distracted. Like, he didn't even get through my instructions of don't do this, I turn around, he's got a camping chair on our couch and is rafting back and forth like this. I'm just like, you're gonna die. So yeah,
we're gonna pay the two older ones well, and they're gonna watch them. Yeah.
It's never gonna work. Oh, I'll tell you something.
We've got time to plan for that.
You have 3 kids?
I have 3 kids. And
all right, so if you get back and you have 2, you still have 2.
Yeah. Like, yeah, this last one's he's a
spoken like a true gay person with no kids.
I mean, I say these things too. I'm like,
kids? Okay, whatever.
Well, and Jennifer's the one who posts the things like, what are you going to do when you're old without kids? And it shows a picture of like a raccoon or a possum pushing somebody in a wheelchair. I'm like, you can't train Tubby to do that. He's too small and too needy.
Yeah. But, I feel like, my new plan for retirement is hoping that meteorite smashes into the earth and kills us all.
And it's instant.
And it's instant.
We can just hold hands, grab our dogs, go out on the porch.
Don't look up.
Have a cocktail and just be done. Right?
That's what that's.
And my friends are like, not to quote Hamilton, but why always writing like you're running out of time. I'm like, well, look at my grandmother and when she died. Look at my mom and when she died. I only have about 12 years left. So,
What an uplifting end to the show.
This is a great end to the show. Like, I hope we all die from a
That's my retirement plan.
If you live that long,
I'm excited. Vince did send me the book, and the Postal Service decided they didn't want to give it to me. So he sent me another one. I've read a digital copy, and I cannot wait to get the real one in my hot little hand so I can take like little photos with it, possibly hold with like the hot dog fingers, but I don't think I can hold the book with the hot dog fingers without hurting myself. So I'll probably not do that.
Well, I love it either way. Vince, thank you, everybody. Make sure you buy the book.
Great being here.
We love you. And we will be back probably in a few weeks with another episode. We've been on like a little hiatus, enjoying our time off.
We've been and figuring out how to use
figuring out a new
next
system.
Time we will make sure we know what we're maybe doing. I don't know.
I think you did great. I think
thank you.
Love you guys.
We love you. Mwah.
Bye.
Bye.